My best friend and I suddenly found ourselves thrust into the pages of a bizarre novel. He was cast as the overzealous admirer of the ruthless second female lead, while I became the substitute for the obsessive first love of a dangerous villainess. Everyone assumed we were madly in love with our respective leads, but in reality, we were merely exploiting their affections for our own gain while we reveled in our twisted success. One evening, as the dashing male protagonist made his entrance, my friend arrived at my door boasting that he had saved enough money. "What about you?" I asked, only to hear him admit that he was still short on funds. I quipped, "Don't worry, I can spend your money first." Later that night, while David was proudly showing off his new computer rig, complete with the state-of-the-art 4090 GPU, Anna unexpectedly returned. Her signature red convertible rolled into the driveway, and in a panic, David shoved me aside. "Quick, hide," he hissed. I scrambled into the closet like a guilty cheater. Mere seconds later, Anna burst through the door. Moments before, David had been reveling in his wealth, but now his face twisted into one of fury and despair upon hearing her arrival. With bitterness lacing his tone, David snapped through clenched teeth. "So, you still remember where home is?" Unfazed, Anna advanced with a cold stare and replied, "Noah is missing." David tried to clarify. "I told you, Noah is merely a friend. The feud between the Lin and Fu families is our burden alone." Anna dismissed his protests with a curt, "Keep unrelated people out of this. Do you think I'd kidnap him? He vanished right after contacting you, which makes you the prime suspect." At that very moment, the phone rang. Anna answered, quickly glancing at David before announcing, "Okay, I'll be right there," and turning to leave. David lunged, grabbing her hand, his furrowed brow and trembling cheeks capturing the image of a desperate, lovesick fool. "Anna, it really wasn't me," he pleaded. Her icy gaze warned him silently. "It had better not be." Then, in a final, biting tone, she added, "Until everything is sorted out, I won't see you again." David withdrew, clenching his thigh so hard that tears soon streamed down his face. "Can you leave tomorrow?" he begged, his reddened eyes and pitiful request. "Today is our anniversary. Can't you stay with me, even if just for tonight?" Sending shivers down my spine. How could he say something so repulsive? After a brief pause, Anna freed her hand and coldly declared, "Sorry, the police have a lead on Noah. I must go." The sound of the closing door echoed through the room as David, voice broken, called out, "Anna, come back!" I stood speechless, watching him silent despair until he muttered bitterly, "Damn, that bitch finally left." After wiping away his tears, he let me out of the closet. "Man, that was one hell of a performance," I remarked, genuinely impressed. David rolled his eyes and said, "Cut the crap. We've got a problem." He paused before continuing, "The male lead has arrived and is stirring up trouble. My girl is already following her storyline, and yours likely isn't far behind." I asked, "So you're saying we need to run?" He nodded firmly, adding, "If we don't, we might make money, but we may not live long enough to enjoy it." David and I soon realized that we were both trapped in this twisted narrative. A strong, female-led romance, no less. On the surface, it meant we could take our time while feigning passionate love, but the downside was that neither of us played the male lead. David was doomed to be Anna's infatuated admirer, bound by a family alliance. Even after 3 years of marriage, Anna still refused to let him get close. Meanwhile, I was condemned to be the stand-in for Sophie, the obsessive first love of a ruthless villainess, who had imprisoned me in a villa simply because I resembled her long-lost passion. In many ways, neither of us could complain too much about our parts. After all, Lynn's father wielded such significant political influence that no one dared cross him. And though the novel offered only sparse details about Sophie's past, just hints of a life spent locked away, tortured, and electrocuted until she discovered a garden of clovers with an abandoned piano. The transformation from an unknown girl into an influential femme fatale was undeniable. David and I had spent 3 years publicly playing the roles of heartbroken lovers while secretly indulging in extravagant spending. But now the dynamic was shifting. The male lead, Noah, had reappeared. According to the story, Anna, David's wife, was Noah's most ardent admirer, while my own love, Sophie, had once been Noah's unforgettable first love, someone who would sacrifice everything for his happiness. David warned, "If we don't leave now, we won't get another chance. Noah isn't someone to mess with." He explained that Noah had deliberately called me before disappearing, making Anna suspect I had something to do with his vanishing. Anna, as unyielding as ever, was always indifferent toward me, yet she couldn't directly harm me. But Sophie, unpredictable and obsessive, would go to any lengths if she believed I'd harmed her beloved Noah. I shuddered at the memory of Sophie taking me to her bar once. When a girl feigned to fall into my lap, she had summoned security to break the girl's legs on the spot. Though I was merely a substitute, I was unwilling to risk my life. "Have you saved up enough?" David asked. I shook my head. "I haven't, but I know you have, so I'm going to spend your money." David looked exasperated and complained, "Spending my wife's money to support your schemes? How do you come up with such twisted ideas?" I reminded him of our oath to share both fortunes and hardships. With a tearful nod, he acquiesced. Reluctantly, I set aside the machete I'd been clutching. Once we confirmed that we had enough funds, we began planning our escape. After weighing all options, only one solution remained viable. We had to fake our own deaths. After 3 years of marriage, David and I possessed damning secrets from both the political and criminal worlds. If we didn't vanish, even if Anna and Sophie overlooked our actions, countless eyes in North City would be watching us. "Who's going to die first?" I asked. "I'll take the fall first, you follow," David replied. I argued, "Why not let me die first? Everyone knows the one who dies later is left to clean up the mess." David suggested a game of rock, paper, scissors, which I dismissed as too boring, proposing instead a slapping contest reminiscent of those abroad. Puzzled but eventually agreeable, he consented. Before he could react, I delivered 3 swift slaps. His face flushed bright red. He clenched his fists and glared as if ready to rip me apart. "You win," I said dismissively. David then prepared for his staged death, while I returned home to pack my belongings. I made my way to the basement, where I had hidden all my valuables. To my astonishment, as soon as I stepped in, someone covered my eyes. It was Sophie, her slender, cold hands silencing me as she tiptoed over. In a hushed whisper, she asked, "Where have you been, darling? Sneaking off somewhere?" I caught a faint, unsettling scent of blood on her, as if she had just taken a life. Despite the 3 years that had passed, I still harbored an instinctive fear of her unpredictable nature. My voice trembled as I stammered, "I went to buy you a gift." Opening my hand, I revealed a Van Cleef Arpels clover bracelet. It wasn't extravagant, but it brought a genuine smile to her face. Carefully fastening it on, she moved past me to settle at the piano. "What would you like to hear today?" she asked. I replied, "I love everything you play." The novel offered only sparse details about Sophie's past, hints that she had been confined, tortured, and even electrocuted daily, until one day she discovered a secret garden of clovers with an abandoned piano. There she played every day, drawing a mysterious boy from beyond a wall, Noah. When I entered her life, she recreated that garden for me, insisting I wear a white shirt and sit by her side as she played. That day, her piano music carried an undercurrent of agitation. Mid-performance, she abruptly stopped, kicked off her shoes, and pressed her feet onto my lap. I instantly understood her silent plea. I grasped her calf, moving my hand upward, and in that charged moment she trembled and leaned against the piano, the dissonant notes mingling with her murmurs. I kissed her, and she returned the kiss passionately, wild and unrestrained, her breath as chaotic as her thoughts. "Don't ever leave me like that again," she whispered. I answered with a half-hearted murmur that was clearly insufficient. In the ensuing confusion, as we fumbled with each other's shirts, we became tangled together. I had to admit, in a strange way, I considered myself luckier than David. While he was condemned merely to spend money, I was granted a far richer experience. Yet, under no circumstances could Sophie ever learn that truth. At one point, as I held her close and kissed her cheek, I felt something wet. Tears. For a fleeting moment, doubt gripped me. "Sophie, do you love me?" I asked softly. In an instant, her face turned distant and unresponsive. For 3 years, she had given me everything I desired. Yet when the subject of marriage arose, it was never mentioned. We were nothing more than a stand-in arrangement. It's acceptable to be called boyfriend and girlfriend, but in truth, I was only a temporary partner. My question betrayed a lack of understanding. Sophie bit her lips silently, which in itself was an answer, though today felt different. I pressed on. "Sophie, do you love me? Or do you love the person I'm merely substituting for?" Suddenly, she stood, dressed quickly, and prepared to leave. I sneered, "Is it that you can't answer or that you refuse?" Pausing, she turned back with an icy expression, as if the passionate moments we'd shared were not hers to claim. "James, you've crossed the line," she declared. For years I had maintained strict boundaries. After all, making money was nothing to be ashamed of. But today I couldn't let things go. After she left, I bombarded her with over 40 calls until she finally blocked me. I couldn't help but chuckle. Perfect. Sophie had taken the bait, and for the next 3 days, she neither answered my calls nor visited the villa. This only improved our chances for a successful escape. I hurriedly gathered my valuables and transferred them to a secret safe place. Late that night, David came looking for me. "Are you ready yet?" I asked. "I'm ready," he replied, though he double-checked everything with suspicion. Satisfied, he nodded, and I whispered to myself, "Now I can go die." That very day, events took a dramatic turn. Anna's team discovered an unconscious Noah in an abandoned building, clutching a cufflink. Anna's eyes widened in recognition. A year earlier, on their wedding anniversary, David had gifted her a Chinese gown, painstakingly hand-embroidered over 3 years and adorned with intricate Sioux embroidery, though the pearls on it were fake, for David had sold the real ones. That same day, Anna had given David an antique ivory cufflink. Before noon, David had somehow swapped it for a cheap imitation, presumably to sell the original, and the cufflink in Noah's hand turned out to be an identical fake. Anna's assistant murmured, "Miss Lin, could it really have been Mr. Fu behind this?" Everyone knew the union between the two families was nothing more than a business arrangement. Yet David was obsessively in love with Anna, his jealousy fierce and unquenchable. Clear evidence that he intended to eliminate Noah out of spite over Anna's divided affections. Anna closed her eyes, sighed deeply, and said, "Let's head to the hospital." On the way, Noah regained consciousness. When he realized Anna had rescued him, he bowed his head in pain and covered his face. "Anna, you shouldn't have come. We must never meet again," he murmured. Gently, Anna asked, "Noah, who did this to you? Who kidnapped you?" After a moment's hesitation, he replied, "I can't say." His conflicted expression spoke volumes. Mr. Lin is a man of great respect. His decades in politics have earned him high regard. If this misunderstanding between Mr. Fu and me tarnishes his reputation, I could never repay that debt, even with my life," he added. Gripping the hem of her dress, Anna realized the terrible truth. It was David. Initially, she had clung to the hope that he might not be responsible, but that hope was now irreparably shattered. Observing her pained expression, Noah urged, "Miss Lin, let's resolve this between ourselves. He may love you too much. The possessiveness is out of control." Just then, the phone rang, its tone heavy with tension. Anna snapped, "Hello, who is this now? Have you lost your mind?" I was taken aback by the fury in her voice, yet I pressed on anxiously. "Is this Anna? I'm David's friend. He's in the hospital and his condition is dire. Can you come quickly?" After a brief pause, Anna, exasperated, demanded, "What is he trying to pull now?" Growing desperate, I continued, "David was in a serious car accident." Her tone remained icy as she instructed, "Tell him to cut it out. Every time he needs something, he pretends to be ill. Tell him to stop milking one sheep dry. If he's injured, he should see a doctor. If he's short on cash, take out a loan. And if he ends up causing problems that I must fix, then what's the point of his constant evasions?" After the call, Anna tossed her phone aside and sank into a prolonged silence, fuming as she recalled countless instances when David had exploited her generosity, like the time he claimed he missed her so desperately he couldn't sleep, caught a cold, and demanded thousands for medical tests, only to later say the doctor advised him to drink hot water. Or when he insisted that the anniversary gift she'd given him had been stolen, alleging he chased a thief for 20 streets, injuring his back, and then needed an expensive massage costing nearly $19,000. Her initial thought was that he must have been involved in something illicit. A quick check of his messages confirmed her suspicions. He had spent that exact sum on a Dragon Slayer sword in a video game. Noah sighed and asked, "Did something happen to Mr. Fu? Should we check on him first?" Anna curtly replied, "I'm fine, forget him." Trying to console her, Noah suggested, "Mr. Fu must have his reasons. Why not sit down and talk it over? There's no issue that can't be resolved." But the more he spoke, the more irritated Anna became. "Don't worry," she finally said. "If he's really done something illegal, I won't let him off easily just because he's my husband." Noah nodded, visibly moved. "Anna, you're amazing." At that moment, her driver inquired, "Miss Lin, are we heading to B Hospital?" Anna responded icily, "No, take us to a life." It was clear that she was deliberately avoiding any contact with David, who remained in B Hospital while she chose A Life Hospital for Noah. After a thorough examination, the doctor reported that Noah had only minor injuries, nothing life-threatening, though he was visibly traumatized, waking up startled from sleep. With gentle reassurance, Noah told Anna, "Don't worry about me, I'm fine. I understand him, and you shouldn't feel compelled to stay out of guilt. You are who you are, and I bear no blame." Initially, Anna had considered visiting David, but after hearing Noah's calm words, she chose to stay. It took Noah 2 days to fully recover. When Anna eventually left the hospital, she checked her phone expecting a barrage of missed calls and messages from David, only to find nothing. A creeping unease settled over her, something she had never experienced before. Despite her attempts to shake it off, her anxiety grew until she finally called me. "Where's David?" she demanded. I remained silent for a long moment before softly replying, "David is dead." A heavy silence followed on the other end until she scoffed. "Stop playing games. Tell David I've calmed Noah down. He's agreed not to involve the police or reveal anything further. There's no need to hide anymore. Tell him to answer my call." I said nothing further, but simply provided her with an address. "If you want to see him that badly, come find him there." At 11 o'clock that night, Anna found me in the foyer where I sat in a daze. When I mechanically turned at the sound of her footsteps, I murmured, "You're here." Without a word, her eyes fell to the urn in my hands. "Is this—" she asked. I slowly lowered my head, caressing the urn. "Didn't I tell you?" "He was in a car accident," I said flatly, my expression void though my eyes reddened with emotion. "If you had come right after my call, you could have seen him one last time. Now it's all too late." As Anna's hands trembled, I interjected, "I know you suspected he kidnapped Noah. Investigate all you want, but whatever you find, it has nothing to do with David anymore." I picked up the urn, turned, and brushed past her. "Wait, he was my husband," she called after me, but I stopped. "You want me to hand over his ashes, don't you?" I laughed maniacally for a moment until uncontrollable tears began to fall. "That's impossible, Anna. While he was alive, his love for you kept him by your side. Now that he's dead, he can finally stop loving you. I'm taking him away, granting him freedom. Please never refer to him as your husband again. After all, you were never truly worthy of that title. Clutching the urn, I left without a backward glance. I could never have given it to Anna. Inside, David had carelessly stuffed a few boxes of powdered milk, even hastily adding some leftover small bones after I had to remind him online that ashes aren't powdery. I trudged to the riverbank and scattered the contents into the flowing water. "Brother, you're free now," I choked out, my voice thick with emotion, aware that Anna was watching my retreat. Once I had dispersed his remains, I climbed into my car and drove away, never once turning back. By now, Sophie should be looking for me, I mused. I expected that after 3 days of punishment from Sophie, she would come after me, but she never did. I deduced that Noah had likely gone to her instead. After David's death, Anna had also distanced herself from Noah, who, true to form, would quickly pursue his next target. Sophie, in hopes of reuniting with her. Meanwhile, the little boy outside the clover garden finally reunited with his mother, a bitter reminder of what I could never be. I drove to Foo Bridge and sat at its edge, reviewing the items I'd left behind at the villa. A 4-leaf clover bracelet, the last gift I gave Sophie, a final letter professing my love, and a forged depression diagnosis to explain the cause of my supposed death. After carefully considering everything, I called Sophie. She answered with a soft hello, but I immediately heard Noah's voice beside her. "Sophie?" I insisted. "I haven't finished yet." Ignoring his interruption, I continued calmly. "Sophie, don't worry. I'm not calling to cling to you. I just want to say thank you. When I first arrived in this city, I was utterly alone, knowing no one. You gave me a home and made me feel loved, and that was enough for me." Her tone shifted slightly as she asked, "James, where are you?" I replied coolly, "I'm glad someone will love you in my stead. You always stay out drinking with your girlfriends until dawn and never heed my advice. I can't pick you up anymore, so be careful not to call the wrong person, and get that old arm injury checked regularly." "James, where are you? I'm coming to get you," she retorted, and for the first time, I truly heard her lose control. A smile tugged at my lips as the wind rushed by. "Sophie, goodbye," I murmured, tossing the phone into the river and leaping off. The icy river water rushed into my throat, but almost immediately the buoyancy layer in my clothes activated. I found myself floating while biting down on the oxygen tube of a custom-made mini scuba device. I drifted along the Foo River until, after about an hour, I collided with a kayak. Looking up, I saw David inside, paddling vigorously. "Finally, you're here," he panted. "Get up here and help, bro. Do you want to kill me?" I clambered aboard quickly, and soon, David and I each took an oar. Me on the right, him on the left, and together we rowed our small friendship boat away from North City. It wasn't until much later that we learned the full extent of the chaos back home. As we paddled away that night, North City erupted into turmoil. Once Anna regained her composure, she mobilized people to search for me frantically. After all, I was the only one present when David died. Anna desperately wanted to know if David had left any final words for her, if he had died hating her. At the riverbank, she encountered Sophie, who was also desperately searching for me. Over the years, Anna had seen Sophie at many events, but never like this. Sophie sat by the river, her face calm on the surface, yet teetering on the brink of madness. Rescue boats shuttled back and forth along the river. Suddenly, a trembling person approached Sophie, calling out, "Sophie, Sophie-ling, Sophie." In a barely audible whisper, she replied, "Hoarse and broken. Did you find the body?" The reply was soft. "No, nothing." Then, in a burst of anger, Sophie stood and slapped the person, instructing, "Keep looking." Anna called out again, but Sophie didn't even acknowledge her, as if she hadn't heard. Taking a deep breath, Anna implored, "Sophie, I understand how you feel, but we're too close to the estuary. It's been 7 hours. The body may never be found." Sophie glared at Anna, tears welling in her bloodshot eyes. Anna's bodyguards rushed forward, fearing that Sophie might actually strike her. But the unpredictable woman did nothing more than stare intently and speak slowly. "Anna, what do you mean you understand? Your husband is dead, but my James is not. Anna's face turned pale as in the ensuing chaos, James had plunged into the river within Lynn's territory. Rising with disheveled hair flying in the wind, Sophie declared, "If you can't find him, I'll make sure you die." The bodyguards paled at her threat. Sophie was nothing like Anna. While Anna came from a dignified political family, graceful and noble, Sophie was as venomous as a snake, always ready to strike, and if she set her sights on someone, she wouldn't stop until she succeeded, even at the risk of mutual destruction. Anna hurriedly summoned her assistant, ordering, "Deploy our boats and search the river." That night, the riverbank was lit up by a flurry of lights as boats scoured the Fu River, but they found neither living souls nor the deceased. Eventually, Anna departed, citing that her father demanded an explanation, while Sophie remained by the river, her gaze fixed blankly as she murmured, "James, you're not dead, are you?" Meanwhile, the chaos in North City no longer mattered to David and me, now living 1,000 miles away in South City. We had become two carefree, wealthy young men living the high life. Time flew, and before we knew it, we'd been in South City for 3 years. At that moment, David and I were enjoying ourselves in a private nightclub room, surrounded by vibrant young models singing and dancing, a scene that might have been mistaken for a girl group audition by an untrained eye. David remarked, "Look at that one. Doesn't she resemble Sophie a bit?" I shivered and rolled my eyes, replying, "Like hell she does. That one looks more like Anna." His comment cast a dark shadow over my heart. In those 3 years, not a word had come from Sophie, while occasional updates about Anna trickled in. News that she had knelt before the Fu family at David's funeral to seek forgiveness, had set up a charity fund in his name, and after his departure, had succumbed to insomnia and alcohol, often ending up in ambulances. As for Sophie, she remained silent. In a twisted way, I should have felt relieved, for it confirmed that I was merely a substitute, insignificant and expendable. Yet, inexplicably, an uneasy tension continued to gnaw at my heart. Fortunately, the two young models beside me were perceptive. They leaned in from both sides, their legs brushing against mine. "Big brother, why don't you feel our legs and see which one suits you better?" they cooed. Intrigued, I agreed. "All right, I'll be completely fair and unbiased." David, however, rolled his eyes and muttered, "Low class." Undeterred, he then turned to the models and said, "Come on, hold out your hands. I'll read your palms." I interjected, "Superstitious as ever, aren't we?" In these 3 years, the empty life of unending wealth had driven David into a fascination with mysticism, astrology, tarot, and even palm reading. There was no subject he hadn't dabbled in. Among his many fleeting interests, one young woman captured his attention longer than usual. Unlike his customary habit of changing companions every few days, this girl, Mary, had stayed by his side for 3 whole months. Mary was an exceptionally bright student at a nearby university. Rumor had it that her father had gone bankrupt, leaving her deeply in debt, which forced her to frequent social establishments to help pay her tuition. With her clear, innocent features and always clad in a white dress, Mary bore a slight resemblance to a younger Anna, though she was distinctly different. When David took her hand to offer a palm reading, her face flushed instantly, and she could hardly bear to meet his eyes. Softly, Mary said, "Big brother, I need your help with something. Could you assist me?" David asked, "Are you short on money?" Mary quickly shook her head and pointed toward a group of young men outside the nightclub. She explained that one of them, a wealthy second-generation student from her school, had been pursuing her relentlessly. Determined to focus on her studies, she refused his advances, but he persisted, showing up every day after her work. Mary then asked David to pose as her boyfriend to deter him. "No problem," David replied confidently as he linked his arm with hers. Her face turned an even deeper shade of red as they approached the affluent young man together. At first, the encounter was tame, but soon the situation escalated. The intoxicated rich kid began shouting and pointing at David while Mary pleaded, "How can you be serious about me?" A guy like you only toys with my emotions. I'm the one who truly loves you. The commotion drew a crowd. Even the DJ stopped spinning records to watch the unfolding drama. I had been casually sipping my drink with my arms crossed, thoroughly enjoying the spectacle from afar, when suddenly an inexplicable chill ran down my spine. Instinctively, I snatched both my wallet and David's and rushed over. David remained immersed in his role, clutching Mary's hand. He boldly declared to the rich kid, "Believe it or not, I'm serious about Mary. I truly love her and intend to marry her." The moment the words left his lips, David froze, his back stiffening as if each vertebra locked in place. In the flickering lights, he saw a figure staring unblinkingly from a distance. The world seemed to halt. It was Anna, lurking in the shadows. Every word David had spoken had reached her ears. Her gaze fell upon their clasped hands, and her eyes turned as cold as ice. "Want to get married?" she sneered, her voice like shattered ice. "David, have you even finalized your previous marriage?" As she spoke, bodyguards from the Lin family began to weave silently through the crowd, closing in on David. Fortunately, I reached his side in time. "What are you waiting for?" I urged, pulling him aside. "Run!" In the ensuing chaos, we knocked over 4 tables, dislodged waiters with trays, and sent 2 carts tumbling as we sprinted into an underground parking garage. "Have you been drinking?" I asked. "No, I haven't had the chance," he replied. "And you?" "Neither have I answered. And so our strange, twisted journey continued, a life of deceit, danger, and dark secrets unfolding page by page in a novel that we never chose to be a part of. Good. No one was driving intoxicated. I quickly retrieved his car keys and tossed mine to him. "Let's split up," I said. David understood immediately. He would take my car while I took his, serving as a decoy for her, James. But there wasn't a moment to spare. "Go," I urged, because time was running out. I dove into David's car and slammed on the accelerator. If Anna managed to find him, then surely the Lin family had already been investigating him. We both left at the same time, and as expected, the pursuit focused on the car registered under David's name. Sure enough, before long, I saw the taillights of our pursuers in my rearview mirror. Then, in an instant, a vivid red streak tore across the night sky, overtaking our followers. As it neared, I realized it was a female rider on a red Ducati motorcycle, slicing through the air like an arrow. Up close, I could see her black leather outfit clinging to her curves, outlining long legs and a graceful back. A single lock of hair escaped from beneath her helmet, whipping in the wind and hinting at wild abandon. The rider trailed my car so closely that it seemed glued to my rear, her wheels spinning with a ferocious intensity. I wondered, where had Anna found someone so daredevil? The way she rode showed complete disregard for her own safety. My heart skipped a beat. I knew Anna well. She was never this reckless. Only one person could be so impulsively daring. Recognizing the figure on the motorcycle without hesitation, I pushed the gas pedal even though I was already at my limit. Suddenly, Sophie's motorcycle surged ahead, then abruptly skidded to a halt as if aiming to cut me off or force a collision. I had no choice but to slam on the brakes. The car came to a stop just a few millimeters away from Sophie. My head jerked forward as the airbag deployed, and darkness overtook me. The last thing I remembered was Sophie opening the car door and pulling me out, leaning close to whisper, "James, you really couldn't bring yourself to hit me, could you?" I tried to answer, but then I fell into an endless black void. Later, I dreamed. A dream that took me back to the first time I met Sophie. Back then, I had just entered this world, barely scraping by as I worked at a pharmacy to earn money for my tuition. One day, Sophie entered the pharmacy to buy medicine, her arms and thighs marred with bloody scratches. Most customers recoiled and left, but I stood transfixed behind the counter. She lifted her eyes slightly and asked, "Why aren't you getting the medicine? Do you find me repulsive?" I responded, "You're hurt," and helped her bandage her wounds. Though her presence normally kept people at arm's length, when she sat quietly, there was an almost obedient vulnerability about her. After I clumsily finished wrapping her injuries and handed her the medicine, I said, "All done." As I turned to leave, she grabbed my wrist and inquired, "How much do you earn here per month?" I provided a number, and without a moment's hesitation, she offered nearly 100 times that amount. Stunned, I asked what she needed me to do. Looking at my dumbfounded expression, she burst into laughter and teased, "Would you date me for that sum?" I found her beauty irresistible under the soft light, and thinking it was just a simple transaction, I nodded. For the next 3 years, Sophie's mood swung unpredictably. Sometimes she would sink into deep despair, even resorting to self-harm. Other times, she clung to me like a spoiled kitten. One minute she'd be calmly enjoying a meal I'd prepared, and the next, she'd fling everything off the table in a sudden rage. I alone knew how to soothe her. She memorized all my habits and knew precisely how to manipulate me. I cherished our late nights, whether we were gaming or watching sports, as whenever I stayed up, she stayed up too. Even when I was stressed and smoked uncontrollably, she would mimic me, which eventually drove me to quit both late nights and smoking. On my birthday, Sophie arranged an extravagant celebration. She rented an entire island and invited all my friends under my name, even organizing private plane transfers so that everyone believed I was someone important. My only regret was that she couldn't be with me openly. On her birthday, I pooled all my savings to rent an amusement park and set off fireworks all night long. Under that dazzling display, we shared a passionate kiss, and with tears in her eyes, she pleaded, "James, promise me you'll always stay by my side." When the fireworks finally faded, I awoke in a cold, damp basement with my hands bound. I struggled instinctively, but after one attempt, someone pinned me down from behind. "James, you can't escape," Sophie said as she expertly tied a knot around my wrists with a rope. She was dressed in a black dress, and on her wrist, I noticed a four-leaf clover bracelet, a cheap accessory that nonetheless held deep meaning, as it was the last gift I had given her. Adjusting the knot, she produced some ointment and said, "You're hurt. You need this medicine." Her slender fingers brushed against my knee as she secured me tightly. After 3 years, Sophie knew exactly how to mix pleasure with pain. I trembled, sweat soaking my clothes, as she sat on my lap and gently pressed her cheek against mine, just as she had countless times before. Once the echoes of the fireworks faded, I sighed deeply. "Why are you sighing?" she asked softly. "Sophie, can you let me go first? I need to save David," I pleaded, uncertain if he had managed to escape the clutches of the Lynn family. She responded quietly. "What did you say?" I didn't catch that. Before I could repeat myself, she silenced me with an intense, desperate kiss, her nails digging into my back as if trying to claim something that wasn't hers. I felt profoundly uncomfortable and struggled to push her away. Startled, she looked at me with a mixture of confusion and sorrow, saying, "James, you've changed. You used to be so gentle. You never treated me like this." I retorted bitterly, "Sophie, that trick works on others, not on me." Then, as if accepting my defiance, she laughed and added, "No matter how you've changed, I like you just the way you are." In the confines of that basement, time lost meaning. I soon began refusing food and water until I grew so weak that when Sophie returned with bodyguards to force-feed me nutritional supplements, I would throw them up almost immediately. In a fit of anger, she untied me, seizing my shoulders and demanding, "Do you hate me that much?" Weak and desperate, I mechanically repeated, "Let me go. I need to save David." Finally, she relented, saying, "If you eat, I'll take you to see him." A spark of hope ignited in my eyes as I asked, "You know where David is?" Her reply was chilling. "Yes, he's about to die." Those words struck me like lightning. David was my childhood friend, my only confidant. If he died, I would be utterly alone. I began to shout in desperate protest, but before I could finish, Sophie hushed me with another fervent kiss. Her kiss was fierce, her nails digging in as if to claim a part of me, and I struggled even harder, pushing her away. She gazed at me with a mixture of pity and disbelief, lamenting, "James, you've changed. You used to be so gentle." I sneered back. "That trick works on others, not on me." Later, while riding in her car, I learned the full extent of what had happened. With my help, David had managed to escape, though his getaway was far from perfect. Anna had taken Mary away. Sophie drove me to the seaside, where Mary hung precariously from a crane, suspended high over the ocean. If the crane were to falter, she would fall straight into the tumultuous sea. Anna had employed this cruel method to force David to come forward. When David finally arrived, he stood on the edge of a cliff, one misstep away from plunging into the sea. Amid Anna's unhinged demands, David remained calm. "Go ahead, drop her," he said. "If she falls, I'll jump right after." Anna, standing several dozen meters away, tried to move closer, but with the sea roaring behind him, David took a careful step back. "Are you serious? Do you love her that much?" she demanded. David said nothing for a long, heavy moment, and then she simply stated, "Noah is dead." Both David and I already knew the truth. After leaving North City, Noah had vanished. Sophie had locked him up and, through grueling interrogation, forced him to confess that he had orchestrated the kidnapping incident. In his breakdown, Noah had admitted, "She is my daughter, and she must remain my loyal subject even if she marries someone else." Before his final collapse, he had screamed incoherently. Sophie had collected the evidence, packaged it with Noah's confession, and made 2 copies, one sent to Anna, the other to the Fu family. This act severed all ties between the 2 families. The Fu family, upon learning that Anna had caused David's death over a man, immediately terminated all cooperation with the Gu family. Yet Anna cared little for the fallout. She despised herself far more than anyone. Regret, she believed, was the most terrifying emotion of all, capable of mutating into rage or hatred. At that crucial moment, Sophie handed Noah over to Anna, saying, "Killing him would dirty my hands, so I'm leaving him with you." Back in the basement, as Sophie recounted all that had happened, David and I reacted with shared silence. When Anna saw David's quiet, she anxiously whispered, "Noah is dead. No one will stand between us again. Will you come back with me?" David laughed, then sat at the edge of the cliff. Despite the fierce sea breeze that clung to his clothes like a second skin, he remained as steadfast as a pine tree. "No," he declared. The wind howled, and though only a dozen meters separated us, it felt like an unbridgeable chasm. Perhaps the force of the wind brought tears to Anna's reddened eyes. The once proud woman softened as she said, "David, I know I've wronged you. Would you rather die than forgive me?" David's gaze remained calm as he replied, "Anna, there's nothing between us that needs forgiveness. We've been married for 3 years. I got what I wanted. In a way, I should thank you." His tone was as polite as if he were speaking to a stranger. Suddenly, tears streamed down Anna's face as she recalled, "Noah told me before he died that you and I are the same kind of person. Were those 3 years all a lie?" It was as if she were asking if I had ever truly loved her or if everything had been mere performance. I tried to say yes several times, but the words failed me. In the end, I only laughed, my laughter fading into the wind. "How could that be, Anna? I'm no professional actor. If I acted well, it was because I really loved you." At that, Anna's face turned as pale as porcelain, fragile and trembling. I smiled softly, smoothing my clothes as memories flooded back. I recalled the first time I saw her at a ball, everyone urging me to ask her to dance. I was a poor kid with no experience, but you reached out and agreed to dance with me. I'll always remember your sweet smile and lively eyes, even though I stepped on your feet more than once. Everyone envied me that day, and when I learned you'd be my wife, I was genuinely happy. I told myself, even if you don't love me, I can love you more. As long as you never leave, I'll stay by your side forever. In the midst of a fierce sea breeze, Anna's body swayed, barely supported by her guards. I didn't look at her. Instead, I gazed out over the endless sea. My voice softened as I said, "Anna, do you know? James is my best brother. We planned to leave together, but after he told you I was in an accident, I pitifully thought that if you had come to the hospital for me, I would have stayed. I would have given him all the money I had saved, just to remain with you." A trickle of blood appeared at the corner of her mouth. A rumor had long persisted that she suffered from stomach cancer, though it was never confirmed. I didn't notice. My eyes were fixed on Mary, still dangling from the crane. "So I won't be with you," I declared. "It's not about Noah or Mary. Killing her today won't change anything. I simply don't love you anymore." That was the final verdict. Anna appeared utterly drained, turned slowly, and walked away. Her shirt fluttered in the wind as her bodyguards followed her, and soon blood began to spill from her mouth until, in the ensuing chaos, I saw David seize the moment to rescue Mary. He spotted Sophie's car in the distance with me inside. James. In his desperation, David rushed forward to save me, but Sophie intervened by shouting at the driver, "Turn around!" The car sped away, leaving David far behind. Soon after, as Sophie's car thundered down the highway, police sirens wailed in the distance. The driver's face paled, but Sophie smiled chillingly, pressed a kiss to my mouth, and whispered, "It's okay, just lose them." The driver hesitated, then said, "Miss Yen, this isn't North City. If you cause trouble here, no one will protect you." Sophie pretended not to hear him. Clutching me tightly, she murmured into my ear, "I'm not like Anna. When she found out that David no longer loved her, she broke immediately. I'm different. You might not love me now, but one day you will. And even if you don't, you'll die with me." She kissed me fiercely. "You promised to stay with me forever, remember?" I replied, "Sophie, I did promise, but I have to ask, are you planning to marry me? If not, how can we truly be together forever?" For a fleeting moment, a sense of joy washed over us, a brief pause in the chaos. I hadn't realized then that I was merely a stand-in, foolishly giving all my love to Sophie. "What kind of diamond would you like for the proposal?" I teased, recalling how a friend's proposal had gone awry with a pink diamond. "Maybe something simple," she said, "or perhaps something symbolic, like planning for a daughter, your little comfort." I held her close, pressed a kiss to her forehead, and said, "Then give up everything, marry me, and I'll keep my promise to stay with you forever." Later, I found myself sitting in a small park carpeted with clover, lost in thought when David rushed over and helped me up. "Man, you scared me to death. How could I survive without you?" he exclaimed. I rolled my eyes and pushed him away. "Get lost, and don't think I didn't hear you say you'd considered abandoning your brother for Anna, you traitor!" David looked exasperated as I recounted everything that had happened. His eyes widened in disbelief when he asked, "So Sophie just let you go?" I replied, "Yeah. Isn't she a psycho? I thought she'd rather die with you than let you go." I smiled sadly, understanding that even if she was willing to sacrifice herself, she would never truly commit to marrying me. No one understood Sophie's ambitions better than I did. She was the illegitimate daughter of the Liu family, born of a violent encounter between her father and his secretary, though everyone preferred to blame her mother for seducing her boss. Amid endless disdain, her mother died young when Sophie was only about 7 or 8, and her life thereafter was a tumult of hardship. Eventually rescued, she knelt at her mother's grave and vowed that nothing would stop her from climbing to the very top, even if it meant stepping on every man in her path. Now, as the only Liu descendant left, her wealth made her a coveted partner for many young heirs. I often recalled that after all the chaos, suffering, and tears she had inflicted on me, she never truly let go. In the 2 years that followed, I never saw Sophie again. It was as though she had vanished from my life. David and I spent our days laughing and indulging in hedonistic pursuits. Occasionally, I would ask him if the words he had once spoken to Anna were sincere or just a tactic to save Mary. But he would ignore me, immediately taking the hand of a nearby model and remarking on trivialities. I let it go with a smile. Then, one day, while walking in a park with David, I noticed a red motorcycle parked by the roadside. Looking up, I saw Sophie, as stunning as ever in a form-fitting outfit. And she approached with a casual, "What a coincidence," explaining that she wasn't here to find me but to meet her boyfriend. I teased, "Here to see your boyfriend?" And she nodded, adding that she had something on her mind. I sat for a while, lighting a cigarette, but she quickly took it from my mouth before handing it back awkwardly. After a moment of silence, she said lightly, "Long time no see. Want to talk for a bit?" David glanced at me and then left, saying he would wait at the shop. Sophie and I continued our walk until we passed an ice cream stand with an enormous cone piled high with scoops. The old Sophie would have insisted on sharing, but this time she bought ice cream just for herself. Returning with 2 cones, she smiled and handed one to me. I hesitated and said, "Thanks, but my wife and kid don't let me eat sweets." Perhaps it was only my imagination, but I noticed her hand tremble ever so slightly before she quickly masked it with a smile. Holding the melting cones, she murmured, "I'll go meet my boyfriend then." At that moment, a little boy ran over, eyes fixed on the ice cream, and I said, "Give it to the kid. I can't eat it anyway." After a brief pause, she agreed, handing over the treat. The boy thanked her sweetly and scampered off while the setting sun gilded the distant lawn with a color that seemed eternal. I heard her whisper, "Goodbye," and I replied in kind as she donned her helmet, mounted her motorcycle, and rode off into the sunset. David later appeared by my side. "Why did you lie to her? You're not married, and you don't have a kid," he chided. I sighed and admitted, "She's here for an arranged meeting. This marriage is crucial for her future. She must forget about me completely." David patted my shoulder and asked, "Does it hurt, man? Do you really not love Sophie anymore? Anna has late-stage stomach cancer and wants to see you. Aren't you considering it?" "Let's go get a drink," he urged. Sometimes Sophie felt that James understood her perfectly, while at other times she believed he knew too little, and that was by design. James was just a lover, and it was better if he remained unaware of the darkest parts of her past. For instance, he never knew that after her mother's death, Sophie had been deceived into a seedy underworld before rising to become Lou's heir. An older sister who had followed a similar path had once helped her. By the time that sister turned 20, she had already mingled with high-ranking officials and become a prominent figure in North City's social circles. With her assistance, Sophie met powerful and wealthy people, became their mistress, and used them to build her own empire. She methodically eliminated her siblings, securing her place as the sole candidate for the Lou family. Sophie had once believed that the older sister would relish toying with men alongside her. But when that sister turned 36, she declared that she was pregnant and in love with a man who truly cared for her, desiring to leave that world of power behind. In hindsight, perhaps Sophie would have tried to convince her that once you set foot on that path, there was no turning back. Back then, she simply didn't understand. After the older sister departed, those who feared she might reveal secrets came searching. They kidnapped her husband and child, demanding ransom for their safe return. When Sophie finally found her, the older sister lay on the roadside, nearly broken beyond repair. With a sliver of life remaining, she asked, "Are they okay?" Sophie reassured her, "They're okay." Then, with final clarity, the older sister advised, "Little sister, remember my words. If you want to climb higher, you can't have any weaknesses. For women like us, giving our hearts away is not true love, it's a death sentence." Before passing, she instructed, "Don't tell your brother-in-law I'm dead. Just say I ran off with another man, left him some money, and told him not to come looking for me." Sophie agreed, though deep inside she knew the truth. The kidnappers had left no survivors. The older sister's husband and child lay dead just meters away. Sophie had shielded her from that sight with her own body, arranged their funerals, and exacted revenge. For nearly a decade afterward, Sophie carried those parting words in her heart, using countless men as stepping stones to climb even higher. Rumor had it that the boy who once listened to her play the piano was her unforgettable first love, a notion she found laughable, yet she allowed the rumor to persist. After all, having a fabricated vulnerability was better than having none, and it meant that if the world believed she cherished that first love, James would remain safe. James had stayed with Sophie the longest, and though she was careful never to let him know too much, there came a time when he asked her, during one of her rare vulnerable moments, "Do you love me?" She almost admitted that she did, but stopped herself, haunted by memories of shattered bones, loss, and betrayal. Unable to face the question, she fled, knowing that James was left in pain. And so, her heart ached too. She distanced herself, and for 3 days, we did not meet. To distract herself, she met with Noah, a meeting that eventually grew tiresome, as the only part that interested her was his connection to Anna. But before she could manipulate the Lynn family through him, tragedy struck. James died. In a moment of reckless abandon, Sophie raced her motorcycle to the river, nearly driving straight into it. The Liu family elders were furious. Her actions had nearly ruined years of carefully constructed plans and jeopardized her prospects with any wealthy family. Yet, in that moment by the river, she didn't care. All that mattered was her conviction. James wasn't dead. She had no evidence, only an inner certainty that he was still out there. While Anna succumbed to despair and ruined herself with stomach cancer, Sophie never stopped searching. When her own resources proved insufficient, she barged into Anna's home and demanded, "Lend me your people." Anna asked, "Why should I?" And Sophie replied, "I don't care if you lend them or not," before turning to leave. With resignation, Anna called her back. "Take whoever you need." Finally, Sophie found James, but he told her to give up everything and marry him. Sophie often wondered why so many girls rushed into marriage, though she herself hated being tied down. Yet on her way back, an unfamiliar happiness stirred within her as she remembered the older sister's peaceful smile in her final moments. Not the horror of broken bones, but that serene expression. Returning to North City, Sophie resolved to be 1,000 times more meticulous than her predecessor. She severed ties with her past identity, reallocated her assets, and secured protection so that no one could ever harm James. It took 2 long years, and eventually, Sophie was ready to leave behind everything. No longer would she be Sophie. She could be anyone, as long as it meant being with James. But fate intervened. James had already moved on, married, and had a child. Summoning her courage, Sophie asked him about his wife, whether he was happy, though in the end, she kept her questions to herself. Members of the Liu family urged her to hurry, saying that the young master in South City was eager to see her. For a moment, she considered it, a blind date, a marriage with someone who loved her, a chance to settle down. But then she thought of Anna. If she took that path, she'd become no different from Anna. Without warning, Sophie turned her motorcycle around. With the setting sun behind her and the evening breeze trailing in her wake, she headed in the direction of the man she loved, without ever looking back. Meanwhile, a little boy clutched an ice cream cone as he skipped over to a little girl. "A very handsome big brother and a very pretty big sister gave this to me," he announced proudly. "Here, it's for you." The little girl asked, "Why are you giving it to me?" And the boy replied, "Don't ask so many questions. Just eat it." She smiled sweetly as she took a bite and suddenly exclaimed, "Oh, the ice cream is melted." A bracelet tumbled out of the cone, a 4-leaf clover bracelet from the boy's hand, with a large, sparkling pink diamond ring dangling from it in the girl's grasp. They turned together to look back, and in the fading light, on a vast field of clover, one lone 4-leaf clover grew strong and proud. And so the story unfolded, a tale of reckless escapes, bitter betrayals, and hearts torn between love and ambition, reimagined without chapters or repeated lines, its essence transformed into a continuous narrative.